Do, 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 do. Boom, boom, boom. Well, we'll have quite the show for you in a moment. You're going to be so happy you're here. It's good to see you. Thanks for coming in. Boom, 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 boom. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the highlight of human civilization. It's called Coffee with Scott Adams, and you're lucky to be here because it's the best time you'll ever have in your life. And if you'd like to take this experience up to levels that your dopamine can barely support, all you need is a cup or a mug or a glass, a tankard, chalice, a stein, a canteen, jug or flask, a vessel of any kind. Fill it with your favorite liquid. I like coffee. And join me now for the unparalleled pleasure of the dopamine of the day. The thing makes everything better. It's called the simultaneous sip. It happens now. Go. Oh, technology is working. People streaming in. There's love everywhere in the air. Should we do a great show? Sure. I think you deserve it. Boy, I got to remind you. So I had famously, I talk about it too much. I had some food poisoning last week, and followed by a week of stomach aches until my body chemistry recovered, which it did yesterday. And so yesterday I had my first full day of feeling good, followed by waking up well rested and feeling good today. And I have to remind myself that my body and my brain are just part of the same tool, because everything I didn't like yesterday or the day before was fine after my stomach stopped hurting. So it turns out that, my preferences, my filter on life, what was good or bad, my entire dopamine situation was completely altered by my body. And it made me think my brain was having a bad time. As soon as my body was better, brain on point, everything's fine. So I always think it's a mistake to imagine that your brain and your body are separate creatures. It's just your brain. Your body's part of your brain. If you treat it that way, you're going to get much better results. So do your exercise and your diet and get that right. Well, apparently there's reports that NORAD intercepted Russian and Chinese bombers near Alaska yesterday. I don't worry about that. Maybe they were testing the air defenses. Maybe they were testing us politically, but they weren't going to attack. There's not really any chance that China is going to attack the mainland United States because our president looks wonky, or Russia. So no, there's no real risk of a nuclear war breaking out because the president's in bad shape. I'm pretty sure that our adversaries know, well, first of all, that a war with the United States under any situation would be catastrophic for everybody. But they also know that if we look like we don't have a leader, that would change 1 minute after they attacked. It would take 1 minute for somebody to say, Biden, sit over there. And we'll do what we have to do. So, no, we're not really in any danger. Long term, I mean, you could imagine that if this were a long-term situation, yes. But 6 months, no, the adversaries are going to wait it out for sure. Well, Kamala did her first ad of 2024, and End Wokeness is reporting on X that lots of pride flags and hardly any white men. And I think the only white man featured was Trump's mugshot, and then a white guy, maybe shown from the back, and that was it. All the faces were women. It was just women. And so I want you to look at it, and you tell me if it's an anti-male ad. I think it is. I think there's nothing to be hidden at this point. It's men against women. And the women who are on the right tend to like men, so they're basically on the same side. But on the left, it's really just the women. And whoever Kamala picks for vice president is going to have to put up with a lot of humiliation because she'll probably pick a man. I think she'll pick a man because it would be too on the nose to have two women running at the same time. It would be a little too obvious that it's women against the men. So they're going to have to pick a beta male. Of the people who have been suggested so far, who is the most beta male? I saw that Greg Kelly or Mark Kelly. So I saw that Mark Kelly was one of the people suggested, but he seems to be a little bit alpha. Would you agree? I don't know anything about him, but just based on resume and physical appearance and stuff. So he looks a little alpha. So I don't think you can pick an alpha male because that would be just disgusting to the women who run the Democrat Party. So it can't be an alpha male. So you should eliminate anybody who looks like they could be an alpha male in a different context. That would just be the wrong fit. Now, some say, what about Buttigieg? I think Buttigieg would be its own problem because he's not exactly, killed it in any domain. And, maybe he'd get the gay vote, but the gay vote's already Democrat. They don't need to get the gay vote, do they? They already have it. So I don't know what he would add. I don't know that he would be really highly likely to be a president after that. So it wouldn't be setting him up for the next election. So I don't know that they really have any good choices. We'll see. Could be that they'll pick somebody that hasn't been spoken about yet. So it would have to be somebody. It would have to be somebody who's probably not a woman, probably not LGBTQ, because I think the country is not ready. I'm ready. You're ready. Yeah, I think most of us are ready. Ready is even the wrong word. I wouldn't see it as relevant to doing the job, but I don't know if it's electable, the way the country is. So I don't think they would put somebody in they didn't think could really help. So who would it be? I feel like anybody they pick would give somebody a reason to not vote for them. But I can't imagine who they would add that would make it Kamala more likely to get elected. So this will be really interesting. We'll see what they come up with. All right, Netanyahu addressed Congress, of course, super political. And Biden wasn't there, and Harris wasn't there, and J.D. Vance wasn't there. But, they have reasons. They're trying to run for president. And I don't think they need to run back because there's an allied country's leader in town. So I have no problem whatsoever that somebody had something better to do. But if you're looking for the highlights from that, Netanyahu said that the people who are the gays for Gaza are it's like saying that you're a chicken for KFC. Now, apparently that got a lot of attention and, it was like a applause line. But you've all heard that 100 times, right? Is there anybody here who had never heard somebody say that the gays for Hamas were kind of like chickens for KFC? You've all heard that, right? So here's one of those interesting situations where it wasn't well written, but he already knew it worked. So it was a cliche that maybe not everybody had heard yet. So it looked like it was a home run in terms of persuasion, and it got picked up and it was reported everywhere. So he probably made a dent. Only because conservatives have been saying this forever. They've been saying gays for Gaza is like chickens for KFC. See, I don't know who said it first, but maybe because it's a big line from now a big public event, maybe that penetrates. I would love to, see if somebody who followed that news and who is a gay for Gaza, I'd love to see if they could kind of process that. It'd be fascinating. Yeah, anyway, what else did he say? He said I have a message for these protesters, because the event was protested in a big way. When the tyrants of Tehran, who hang gays from cranes and murder women for not covering their hair, are praising, promoting, and funding you, you have officially become Iran's useful idiots. And then there was a big applause for the line useful idiots. And I said to myself, again, that's the most cliched thing you could ever say in public. That somebody is somebody's useful idiot. I mean, on social media, you just hear it literally every day. Oh, you're the useful idiot for Russia. So amazingly, it was the most cliche-filled thing you've ever seen, but apparently they landed, because not everybody hears all the same cliches. And but Nancy Pelosi wasn't too happy about it. She said that Netanyahu's presentation in the House chamber today was, quote, by far the worst presentation of any foreign dignitary invited and honored with the privilege of addressing the Congress of the United States. So I guess she is in favor of Biden's hostage peace plan. Now, I don't know what that is. I guess that's pause the fighting, trade the hostages, and then let Hamas reconstitute. Why is that even a conversation? It's the weirdest thing. Like, has anybody ever been in a conversation with, let's say, an Israeli who knew what they were talking about, let's say a government person, and say, we think you should stop the fighting and then we could get those hostages back? Wouldn't the Israeli, whoever it was, say, well, you realize what you're promoting is rebuilding the situation that caused all the problems, which is Hamas in charge next to us and having access to things and money? What would they say to that? Would they say, oh, don't worry, because Hamas is only angry because you mistreated them? So the moment you stop mistreating them, things should be fine and peace will break out. And then you can live in one big country or two, which way ever you're going, and everybody will be fine. Does anybody believe that? Yeah, I saw some people on the street interviews of Palestinians over in the West Bank, and it seemed to me that every one of them was in favor of October 7th and thought that killing Jews was totally appropriate and that they should all die. How in the world do you reconstitute that and say, here's your country back, here's your city, I hope we didn't break anything, we'll fund you to rebuild? Israel is doing literally the only thing it can do. So to imagine that there are two paths, it's like, oh, you didn't pick the right path. There's only one path. The only one path is to suppress their enemies as hard as possible for as long as possible. What happens in the long run is not looking good, but what else are you going to do? Thomas Massey skipped it. He said he didn't want to be part of political theater. And he says Netanyahu being here is to bolster his political standing in Israel, to quell international opposition to the war. He doesn't want to be a prop. I respect that. I have to admit, he's completely right that it was a theatrical event for brainwashing and propaganda. But the government is mostly a brainwashing operation and propaganda operation. So most of what we do are that. Yeah, if he wants to call it out as a theater that it is, I think that's fair. He will, of course, be called anti-Semitic, and AIPAC will be after him, etc. All right. So Biden addressed the country, and apparently some people like me were thinking that if it were real and it were live, it would be late. Meaning that if I turned on the TV right at 5 o'clock, it's very unlikely that I would see Biden talking. So I waited until, 17 minutes after, and I turned it on, and I'm like, wait a minute, it already happened? How's that possible? And then some other smarter people took a close-up look at his watch, and apparently his watch had a different time than the time it started, meaning it was recorded. Now, You didn't have to look at his watch to suspect it was recorded because he was speaking so haltingly and so slurringly and so poorly, and his energy was so low, and he looked like he might die while he was talking, frankly. He was in bad, bad shape. It would be hard to imagine that he did that in one take, first take. Very hard to imagine. So it would have been absurd for them to do that live. It would have been absurd. It would have been, honestly, it would be like some kind of weird malfeasance or, fiduciary responsibility. It would have been super, super irrational and dumb to do that live. So at least they played it smart. I can't get too excited about anything that happened in his speech because he's no longer terribly relevant. But a few things he said were he didn't give a reason for why he quit except for unity over personal ambition. So he took a few cuts at Trump. And he wants to save the democracy, which, of course, is what they tell the brainwashed people who think their democracy is at risk. Let's check on the democracy. Since the Democrats are quite concerned about democracy, let's do a little audit from the headlines to see if there's anything about the democracy that's questionable. Well, there's the O'Keefe Media Group. James O'Keefe is looking into this Democrat funding group called Act Blue. And you were probably surprised at how much money suddenly flowed into Kamala Harris as soon as she became the obvious candidate who's going to be the candidate. And apparently Act Blue is collecting thousands of contributions from like one person. Not one person, but there are individuals, multiple individuals, who are donating thousands of times and donating tens of thousands of dollars. It's all fake. In other words, somehow this organization, according to O'Keefe, that would be the allegation, they probably knowingly, I don't know about the knowingly, but there seems to be evidence that their money is being laundered. And that would mean it's coming from some large, big source, and then it gets turned artificially into lots of fake contributions from individuals. So one person could put in $1 million, but then the paperwork would look like it came from 100,000 different people who gave $10 or whatever. So I don't know if any of that's true. Those are the allegations, and O'Keefe Media Group is on it. Then we've all watched this really just head-shaking experience where we all thought that Kamala Harris was the border czar. Do you know why we all thought Kamala Harris was the border czar? It's because the government told us, and then every news source told us that. Every news source, the left, the right, all of them. And then as soon as she's running for president and the border was a big disaster, the news is telling us she was never the border czar. My God, you lying Republicans. Why are you calling her a border czar when she was never any kind of a border czar? And then all the memers got the compilation videos together. So my favorite one, you've probably seen it by now, is the one that shows the news calling her a border czar, and then the same news network saying, whoever called her a border czar? She's never been a border czar. And then it goes to the next network. So it's like CNN, then MSNBC. She is the border czar. She's Kamala Harris. She is the border czar. Clip. She's not a border czar. Who? Like, why are they even saying that? That Republicans are just making up stuff now. Why are they saying she's a border czar? It's unfucking believable to watch it happen live. So, do you think that brainwashing is real? Of course it is. This is just pure brainwashing. If you ever imagined that the news was a legitimate news organization, well, this should change your mind pretty quickly. And how many Democrats are aware that this switcheroo is happening? None. Maybe Michael Ian Black, because he was brave enough to open a channel with the other side of the world. So maybe he's seen it. But I'll bet you 99.999% have never seen that she was definitely, absolutely, no doubt about it, called the border czar by all the media that says she's never been the border czar. Hilariously. Will this matter? Nope. No. You would think that this would be like gigantic scandal. You know why it's not a gigantic scandal? Because it's the news. The news doesn't tell you that they are a gigantic scandal. The news just takes you to the next story. So there's nobody to report them as a gigantic scandal because it's about them. Now, of course, Fox News will have its fun and Breitbart will have its fun and a bunch of independent right-wing media will have its fun, but nobody on the left will see it. So it'll have no impact on the election whatsoever. They will be completely unaware that this is brainwashing. Meanwhile, there was a site called GovTrack. So it's a nonpartisan platform, and they would rank people based on how liberal they are. So in 2019, they had ranked Kamala Harris as the most liberal senator. But that page just disappeared. Huh. Isn't that interesting? It was up there and then it disappeared. Now, maybe it disappeared because she's not currently a senator. That's a possibility. So I don't want to assume that I know that what's really going on here. But are you suspicious that something that used to be really bad for her reelection just sort of disappeared? Well, I've got questions. I don't know for sure there wasn't a real reason for it. I don't know that. What am I seeing here? Yeah. So if they just deleted it, it's definitely fuckery. If it was deleted some time ago, then maybe there was some reasons that, she wasn't a current sitting senator or something like that. But if it just happened, it's hard to imagine there's any reason other than the fact she's running for president. What about the search engines? Well, we got questions about that. Elijah Schaefer was looking into that. Vigilant Fox was reporting on X, and it looks like something fishy is going on. If a new audit reveals, now I'm not sure what an audit, that word might be stretched a little bit, but some experimentation, let's say, with the Google and YouTube search results. It's really hard to find any negative news about candidate Harris. Turns out if you search on YouTube or you search on Google, you get a lot of hits. Will they be real? Well, it looks like they're gamed. Now, we know from Dr. Epstein's research, no relationship to Jeffrey Epstein, that a small change in the Google search results changes the vote. Does this look like a small change in the Google search results? Yes, it does. Should, according to Dr. Epstein, would this change the election outcome? Yes, it would. Is this brainwashing? Yes, it is. This is brainwashing. Yeah. Calling it propaganda feels like underplaying it. This is actually just brainwashing. So let's look at the MSNBC brainwashing channel. MSNBC's Joy Reid is telling Black people that they would look real weird, in her view, if they don't vote for Kamala Harris. Quote, "You're going to look real crazy being on the other side of that line, particularly as a person of color," Reid said. And she gushed over Biden's dropout address and said, "This was selfless on a level, I think, that's important in a way that we talk about George Washington being selfless." Yeah. Clinging to the job until it's almost too late to replace him, giving the country no real choice until they have to act against let's say, the traditions and rules of their own party to pick somebody at the last minute and try to slot them in with some hope that they can win an election. It's because Joe Biden was so selfless like George Washington. Do you know what offends me about this? She just compared the president of the United States to a slave owner. That's too far. I don't think Joy Reid should be allowed to slime Biden by calling him a slave owner. I mean, by association. If she's reminding you of a slave owner, I don't think that's good, is it? All right. Well, you know I'm being facetious. But certainly you can't call MSNBC any kind of a news channel. They're into serious brainwashing. But what about other people? Maria Shriver used to be married to Arnold Schwarzenegger, and of course, part of the Kennedy family. So she's a big Democrat. She posted on X today, "It's worth noting how different men with power behave. President Biden had all the power in the world, and he gave it up. He passed it on. He's reminding us what strong, brave men do." All right, is Maria Shriver brainwashed or dumb? I can't tell. Or is she just lying? Brainwashed, dumb, or lying? Really can't tell. It's a tough one. I don't think she's stupid, because would Arnold marry somebody who was stupid? I don't think so. And there's no evidence that she's stupid. She seems very high-functioning, capable person. So I'm going to rule out stupid. Let's rule out stupid. She's obviously too smart for that. Is she brainwashed, or does she know what she's doing? I don't know. It's hard to know. Let's do another one. Representative Burchett, Republican, called Kamala Harris a DEI hire. And so CNN had a guest on to remind us that when you hear DEI, you should think the N-word. Is that what DEI means to you? You should think the N-word? DEI isn't about black people. Why does their black guest think that DEI is about black people? That's not about black people. It's about diversity in general, of all kinds. Sexual, gender preference, religious, every kind of ethnic group. So it's definitely not a replacement for the N-word. But, CNN's not a serious news organization during a political election, certainly. And it looks like the attack will be to call people who say DEI is a bad system, to call them racist. Now, I'm canceled, so I can keep saying it all I want. The rest of you better be careful, because it's going to get, I think it will be soon a firing offense to say somebody is a DEI hire. If it's not already, it probably is in corporate America. But I can say it because it's true. You know who else can say it? President Biden. Because when he talked about Kamala, he said, "To me, the values of diversity, equality, and inclusion," in other words, DEI, "are literally the core strengths of America. That's why I'm proud to have the most diverse administration in history that taps into the full talents of our country. It starts at the top with the vice president." So there he is saying that she is under the DEI umbrella of hiring. Now, Burchett is just saying the same thing that Biden said about her, that she was hired largely because DEI is important. Now, no, Burchett would think she's unqualified. Biden would say she is qualified. But we're looking. We can see for ourselves that she's not qualified. Right? You don't have to be super partisan to see it. The reason she got 0 delegates on her own team is because her own team felt she was unqualified. Right? So we shouldn't be having a conversation about whether she's qualified, because both teams have kind of come to the same conclusion, except that they don't like Trump, so they're going to act like she is, because even unqualified is better than Trump, they would say. But we're certainly in agreement that she's not the best choice for the job. And DEI is of course the reason. Of course it's the reason. Now, of course, there's a big push on Trump's going to steal your democracy. And I'm disappointed in Republicans for not already having a list of ways that the Democrats and Kamala Harris plan to steal your democracy. What is wrong with you people? You people, Republicans in charge of Trump's campaign. This is obviously missing. You need a tight list. Maybe 10 things would be good. 10 things that everybody agrees is happening that are clearly taking away your freedom. Because they're just simply saying that Trump is going to steal your democracy, and you look at their examples and they're just batshit crazy. You know, I said this before. One of their ways that he's trying to steal your democracy is by keeping guns legal as the Constitution would suggest. Because if you're less safe, you have less freedom, and guns make you less safe, she would argue. That's an actual argument for how they're taking your freedom and your democracy. Now, that's pretty crazy stuff. But let's see if you can make a better argument the other way. Is there anything that they're doing? Well, we know that Kamala Harris has said she's interested in potentially limiting the eating of red meat for the climate, I guess. So you have fewer cows farting up the air. So is that freedom? Telling you that you can't eat the most basic food in the human diet for 100,000 years. That, as far as we know, is completely healthy. So which one's freedom? Now, she would probably define it and say, well, if we get rid of the cows, you'll have the freedom to be free from climate change, which doesn't appear to be real. If you look at their own climate predictions and projections and compare it to what they've predicted and projected, there seems to be no reality to it. Then the Democrats would like to limit what car you can buy. So you can only buy an electric car. Trump says he's not a big fan of the electric car, but so you should definitely be able to buy an electric car. You know, it's great for some people, but you should have the option to buy them more. Which one's taking your democracy? The one that says you can buy the vehicle you want, or the one that says you can't? It's kind of easy. What do you think open borders are? Are open borders helping your democracy in the United States? It looks like that's the opposite. The open borders appear to be designed for the specific purpose of thwarting democracy, stacking people in areas that will give you more representation, more electoral votes, bringing in people who may be part of a fraudulent campaign for the election. We don't know yet, but it looks like that's the only reason to bring them in. So it looks like you're rigging an election. To me, that looks like stealing your democracy. How about dividing us by identity? Did dividing the country by identity and continually pushing the us versus them within the public, is that making you freer, more democracy? Well, it's free speech, but, both sides have that, sort of. I don't think that's making me freer. There are entire places that it feels like it would be dangerous to go if you wore your MAGA hat. How many of you have ever avoided a place because the country was just too hot now, and you knew that if they identified you as let's say a Trump supporter, you'd be in trouble? Probably all of you. So you can't even travel to places and wear what you want. You can't even wear the shirt that you want in the United States. You cannot wear a pro-Trump shirt without getting your ass kicked. That's the freedom that they've given you. And they did that. That certainly never existed before. How about DEI? Is DEI an example of freedom and democracy? It literally says white men can't get jobs. Now, I know that if you're the one Democrat watching this, you're saying, Scott, you fool. It's not about preference for a race. It's about giving everybody an equal chance. No, you fucking idiots. In the real world, if you make that a priority, then less qualified people will, of course, be hired so that you don't violate the diversity rules. Of course, you'll hire less qualified people. Now, that doesn't mean everybody's less qualified. It means you're going to pick a less qualified one if you can't find one that's qualified. But of course, there are plenty of people qualified, but not enough. Not nearly enough for all the demand. So as long as you've got that supply and demand imbalance, you will hire unqualified people like Kamala Harris because you got to hit the target. And the target is diversity, not country runs better, not company makes more money. All right. Well, I don't think my first take is very good, but I think you could come up with a better list of things. I would add the 3 Democrat primaries are rigged. I would add the massive brainwashing operation that tries to be news. Do you think democracy is about your news sources being obvious brainwashers? That feels like the opposite from democracy, because free speech is kind of important. Tried to close down Twitter, tried to put Musk out of business, jailing the January 6 protesters, canceling people for free speech, limiting gun ownership. That's the freedom they're going to give you. That's your freedom. So there should be a list of 10 things that Kamala Harris wants to take away from your freedom. All right. So I continue to be fascinated by this venture capitalist named Vinod Khosla. So he's a billionaire investor. He'd been one of the co-founders of Sun Microcomputers, Sun Computers a long time ago. And he had said some bad things about MAGA people, but he wanted to clarify. He said, to be clear, MAGA for me is somebody who agrees with Trump on, quote, election denialism and supports the January 6th insurrection attempt. To me, that is unforgivable. Not all Republicans are MAGA. Normal Republicans just have different priorities on the critical issues. Independents like me have a position that is in the middle generally. Now, I can't tell. Is he stupid or brainwashed? Now, again, like with Maria Shriver, it seems impossible that he's stupid, right? It kind of seems impossible because he has a long, storied career of doing things that only smart people can do. So I think he's just brainwashed. So as a public service, I gave him a long response, and I said, and I quote, "You were brainwashed on the J6 narrative. News hasn't been real since the early 60s, at least." Now, people have asked me, Scott, how do you deal with people who are brainwashed? Because you can't have a debate with them. You'd agree, right? You can't have a debate with somebody who's been brainwashed. It just can't be done because they have a whole different fact set and they think you made yours up. That's how they've been brainwashed. So I would say that instead, you should go after the brainwashing, not the argument. Now, you want to go after the brainwashing first so that they can maybe get a context for how they've been fooled about everything. If you go after the facts, they'll just say, that's not true. You're lying. That's not true. I reject you. And that's the end of it. If you say you've been brainwashing, and here's the evidence that you've been brainwashed, maybe you have a way in with some people. It's not going to work for too many. So I started that way. I said, you were brainwashed on the January 6th narrative. News hasn't been real since the early 60s, at least. And I said, Trump and supporters genuinely believed, and still believe, it was obvious the election had been stolen, and they demanded a pause to check their election claims. In other words, they were trying to stop a coup. Any nonsense with alternate electors would get sorted out by the courts. You can't conquer a country with creative paperwork. Trump left office on schedule. Democrats claimed Russia rigged the 2016 election for Trump. They ran the Russia collusion hoax, which was literally a coup. Attempt, anyway. And then I said, you were brainwashed. If you want to test that claim, do you believe Trump called neo-Nazis fine people or that he suggested drinking bleach? If you're looking for the active part of the persuasion, that was it. That was the active part. Everything else was a setup for that last sentence. If you want to test that claim that you were brainwashed, do you believe Trump called neo-Nazis fine people or that he suggested drinking bleach? Here's what he probably did if he read it. He got a lot of responses, so there's no reason to think he read it. But if he did, he probably said to himself, but he did call the neo-Nazis fine people, and he did suggest drinking bleach. And then, if his brain is as smart as I think it is, the next thing that happens is, I do believe that he called neo-Nazis fine people, but nobody would do that in public. Nobody would. What happens if I Google it and Google it as a hoax? He's very close to finding out that the pillars upon which he built his entire belief system are literally brainwashing. And when I use brainwashing, I don't mean it as a hyperbole. I mean it right on target, no Venn diagram problems. It's not just slightly overlapping with brainwashing. It's not a little bit like it. It's not just reminding me of it. It's all the tools of brainwashing right in front of you, right down the middle of the road. Brainwashing. And if you try to have a conversation with somebody who's obviously been brainwashed, you're not going to get anywhere. You're going to have to deal with the fact that it is brainwashing, and you're going to have to go back to, none of your news is real. And then they'll say, but your Fox News isn't real. And here's what you have to say. Sometimes it's probably wrong, but there's a difference. On the left, these elaborate hoaxes are built by the top, the top of the Democrats, and then the news coordinates to sell the hoaxes. Nothing like that happens on the right. The right has its conspiracy theories and gets some stuff wrong, no doubt about it. But it's never coordinated. I would know. I mean, I'm close enough to the people who do things that matter that I would know if there was any coordination. There's none. But with the Democrats, is clearly and obviously coordinated brainwashing. They don't have any sense that they're telling the truth. Certainly with this borders are thing, you can see it very clearly. So I would say if you're going to debate let's do another one. Trump's got a defamation lawsuit now against ABC's George Stephanopoulos, who he calls Slapanopoulos. And it's because, I guess in March, Stephanopoulos said that Trump was found liable for rape. And that didn't happen. So he did have to pay money, and he was found liable for something that wasn't rape. But, and apparently that case might go forward. So a Florida judge rejected ABC's motion to dismiss it. So it's a defamation case. What's interesting about it is it's clearly defamation. No doubt about that. But I think they'd have to prove that he knew better. I don't think it counts if he thought it was true and said it. So they would have to prove that George Stephanopoulos didn't know the news on ABC News, which I think would be his defense. He would probably say, that's the way I interpreted it. I didn't know it was wrong. So I think he would have to correct it at the very least. All right. We'll see how that goes. If the only thing that came out of it is ABC was forced to issue a correction, I don't think that would help Trump as much, because the correction would just say, well, it wasn't technically rape, but technically it was something bad, so it's just something bad. So I don't think it's going to help him that much. But I do like the fact that Trump is lawfaring his opposition. So I would say that if you're going to debate the brainwashed, you should publicly label them as brainwashed. because sometimes public exposure may be more important than your good arguments. All right. Harry Enton on CNN is saying that Trump's more popular than he's ever been. He's up to, depending on the poll, 40 to 46% favorability, which doesn't sound that great, but it's the highest it's ever been for Trump. And that nationally, according to their new poll, Trump is up by 1 over Harris, whereas he was up by 4 over Biden, but probably doesn't mean anything because Trump lost the national vote by, what was it? No, Biden was up by 4 when Trump won the time he won. No, I've got these numbers backwards, but the basic idea is this. Forget all the numbers I just gave you. The basic idea is that Trump may be barely ahead or essentially tied in the overall country vote, but all that matters is the electoral situation, and Trump is dominating in that. Rasmussen has a poll that says if it were just Trump versus Harris, Trump would be up by 7, 50% to 43. But since he won't be alone, in a 6-way matchup, if you throw in all the other candidates, Rasmussen would get you to Trump gets 49 to 42. So still a dominant position, even with the other people thrown in. We shall watch the polls going forward. I think that it's going to get real interesting. Trump has announced that if he gets elected, he wants to build an iron dome to protect the country. So he'll build the wall and he'll build the dome. Do you want a iron dome? Yes, you do. And he'll build it in America and deploy it in America. I think we need an iron dome. I really think we do. If the only thing it did was, it could knock that one nuke out of the air that was going to start a nuclear war. If that's the only thing it did, it'd be worth, $500 billion. So we'll see if that happens. And by the way, I would call this an example of future-proofing the country. Right? You have to future-proof the country. There will be more things that are deadly coming at us from the air. You got to get ready for it, and it's going to take a while to get ready. So you got to future-proof the country in that one way. All right, Christopher Wray. You've heard about some of this. So he testified to Congress, and here's some of the things we learned. That the shooter had Googled how far away was Oswald from Kennedy, probably trying to see if he's going to get off a good shot or not. There are suggestions that the FBI has not gotten into all of the accounts that Crook had. They're doing some legal things to get access to them. But he had some other devices and maybe some other gaming platforms. They're not entirely sure. There was one report that he might have had an account on the Gab social media, but I don't believe that yet. So I would put a pin in that one and wait to see if that's confirmed. No evidence of accomplices or co-conspirators. He was described as a loner. His AR-style rifle had a collapsible stock, which answers one of my big questions. So he must have had it in his backpack. At one point, he had a backpack. So that would explain why he wasn't spotted so easily with a rifle. It was folded up. Ray confirmed that Crooks fired approximately 8 times. They only have approximate. That's interesting. Before being killed. So that would be 9 shots. Or would it be 10? Because I think one of the snipers missed him once. So we're a little uncertain how many bullets were flying around. They confirmed that Crooks bought a 5-foot ladder, but they didn't find it, which means he didn't bring it to the scene, which would fit with the fact that he climbed up some of the AC stuff to get on the roof. So he didn't need the ladder, and he may have figured that out after he bought it. Let's see, he flew his drone around a few hours before. We heard that. He had 3 relatively crude explosive devices that didn't look like they were active with transmitters. And Mike Benz reminds us that a tell for FBI being involved, meaning working a source to radicalize him so that they can capture him later after he gets radicalized. Apparently, Mike Benz says that teaching a loner to make crude bombs is a really classic signal that the FBI was behind the whole thing, or at least behind weaponizing him. Now, is that enough of a evidence to say, oh, my God, the FBI was behind it? No, but I would agree with Mike Benz, based on his examples, that it's a real strong signal that somebody was behind him. Now, who? I don't know. But you could certainly imagine it was somebody who had FBI-like training, not necessarily the FBI, but it could be somebody who came from that world or knew that world or, was an anti-Trumper and thought he'd take, it's possible there is one person somewhere in the world who activated and brainwashed this one loner and is actually the assassin. So we know the shooter, but we don't know the assassin because it seems likely somebody was running him. Do you feel that? The idea that he had so little social media presence and yet as a loner he pulled this thing off, that doesn't really track. It tracks like he was impressing somebody, as in somebody became important to him and he needed to impress them. That's what it looks like. So it looks like he was trained and maybe he wanted to impress somebody. I do wonder if he thought he was going to get away with it. There were at least 2 instances, according to Director Wray, where FBI officials expressed disappointment that Trump survived the assassination attempt. And at least one of them is, action is being taken. I assume the other one as well. But I don't know how to judge that, except that people are terrible. We know the FBI had some people who hate Trump. We know that they had people who liked him. And we know that people say terrible things after situations like this. So, I'm not sure how much to weight that. Not too much. All right. So the Congress, the House, has authorized a task force to look into it. Look into the attempted assassination. And it's going to be bipartisan. And it will not include that Benny Thompson guy that the Republicans wanted to make sure he wasn't on there. But he wasn't even interested anyway. Does it bother you that Congress has only found unity over one thing ever? And that unity was to protect themselves, literally to protect themselves, because the Secret Service is part of their protection as well. So I'm kind of disgusted by the unity. Like, as much as you hate the disunity, to see that the only time they come together, really, is when it's about their own safety. That's a real bad look, even though I agree it should be a bipartisan investigation, but I also don't believe it'll be real. I don't think they'll investigate anything because they can only investigate what the FBI tells them. And if the FBI doesn't tell them more than they want to tell them, well, what kind of investigation is that? There's a study that says nearly 4 in 10 U.S. adults worry about their family income not being enough to meet expenses, according to a CNN poll. And that's up from 28% in 2021. Similar to the numbers seen during the Great Depression. We might need to plan to make food available. I hope the government has some kind of a B plan for literal starvation, because I don't know how close we are to the falling over ledge, but between the national debt and the affordability problem of just basics, I think that one of the things that might happen is people just stop paying mortgage and rent. Just stop. And if some people do it, then there's a legal process to remediate. So, you go through the process and maybe the police come to your house and kick you out or something. But if you have 4 out of 10 who can't meet their basic bills, I think they're going to stop paying mortgage and they're going to stop paying rent. And if so many people do it at the same time, there won't be anything you can do. If you're a landlord, you'll have no recourse. It'll be it. So my biggest worry is that the people who can't afford things will organize. And they'll say, if you own this home or you're a bank that has a mortgage, you're rich. I can't afford to eat. So I'm gonna steal from you rich people the way I can steal from rich people, which is not paying the rent. Now, if you happen to be struggling yourself and your only income was that rental unit you had, you're going to be poor too. And you're going to not pay your mortgage and you're not going to pay your loans. So I feel like there's a massive debt walkaway or bill paying walkaway that's coming, because otherwise people won't be able to eat. They won't be able to pay their health care. So I'm a little bit worried, but on the good side, the economy grew at reportedly 2.8%, which was way faster than expected, like twice as fast as expected, and would be in the neighborhood of a good, that would be very solid if that kept up. But does anybody think that that's not going to be revised in a few months? So the pattern that we've seen is incredible good news. Re-elect the Democrats because of the incredible good news. And I think it'll be revised downward. But it's way better than being negative. So it's probably a healthy number. But as long as the debt is high, it doesn't make any difference at all what it is. The doom is the debt. And there's no GDP that can grow you out of it. According to Theo Wald, who is somebody I never heard of, but he must be conservative, 1 in 5 prisoners are illegal aliens. Have you ever heard that? 1 in 5 people in prison are not citizens. Now, if that's true, that would certainly give you an ability to calculate the amount of crime that's inappropriate. Here's what I think conservatives do wrong consistently. There'll be a story about a non-citizen who came in and killed a citizen, and then there'll be all kinds of attention given to that one case. And if you're trying to convince anybody on the left, they're going to say, hey, why are you just focusing on this one crime? People of all type do crimes. It just makes you look racist. But if you were to argue 20% of all our crime appears to be from non-citizens, people can see 20% as a really big number. If I were to ask you, what is the total amount that the government spends on crime? It's like maybe $1 trillion a year. I mean, it's no, not $1 trillion a year. Well, maybe. Well, how much does the entire country spend on law enforcement? So that wouldn't be just the federal budget. That would be local as well. Is it $1 trillion a year? Something like that? I mean, it's in that neighborhood, right? And if 20% of that is unnecessary, that's $200 billion a year. That starts to matter. That's a number that matters. So I would go for that 1 in 5 prisoners as a much more persuasive number than there was a bad one that got in and killed somebody. As tragic as that is, it's not very persuasive. All right. The CBO, according to The Hill, came up with a calculation that says we're going to make over $1 trillion extra in the next decade because of all the non-citizens who came into the country. But if you look at the details of how they calculated it, and you've ever done any kind of economic calculation, you can tell that it's complete bullshit. Now, I think they probably tried, but it's no more reliable than, say, the climate projection models. There are some things which by their nature can't be calculated. You're not going to be able to predict the temperature in 80 years. And everybody who thinks that you can, I don't even know what to say about that. That's so blindingly, obviously not something humans can do. But here's another one that's blindingly obvious. Humans can't do this. You can't calculate the benefit of immigration, because I think they did some clever things with excluding some groups and including some. But do you think that they netted out the crime? Do you think that the CBO said, all right, well, we'll subtract the 200 billion per year. So over 10 years, that would be $800 billion. So they added $1 trillion, but they subtracted 800 billion in just law enforcement, and they took out another $500 billion in public services. Do you think that the CBO included the costs or just the benefits? Well, I don't have to investigate it to know that they didn't include the costs. Do you? Of course not. Of course they didn't. They just looked at what the GDP would do. Now, I've told you as well that there's one general rule that is pretty good, that more people is a better economy. Now, there's some upper limit to that, of course, but generally speaking, immigration adds to the economy, just maybe not right away for the people who come in. It might be a second generation sort of thing, or 10 years later. But yeah, adding immigration, if it's done right, if it's not hugely criminal, I don't know what percentage is criminal, but too much, if it's 20% in jail. If 20% of our jail is, came across the border illegally, that should tell you something. Now, I'm not sure about that 20% number, by the way. If somebody wants to fact check me on that, I will correct it tomorrow. But I guarantee you, they did not calculate all of the expenses and all the benefits. But I still think that immigration is a net plus, a big net plus, a very, very big net plus, if you're not replacing your own people and you do the vetting right so you get non-criminals. All right, here's some good news. There's a strange compound that was used to treat cancer that they found can extract rare earth metals from old tech. So you're worried about all those rare earth metals in your tossed out devices? They might be able to get most of it back. So if you're worried about running out of rare earth minerals, well, maybe we can just suck them out of the old devices and we'll be in good shape. There's also a new class of antibiotics that looks like it wouldn't be resistant. One of the big problems in the world is that we use antibiotics so much that everything just evolves to be immune to those antibiotics. So at some point, there was worry that antibiotics would be useless. They would all be overused to the point where they don't work anymore. But there's a new one that looks like it has some strange properties that can kill all kinds of bad stuff without ever giving you some kind of immunity to the treatment itself. And then the two AIs, Gemini and ChatGPT. I guess the MRC Newsbusters people asked them the following question. Let's see, here's the question. Is comparing a public servant to Adolf Hitler, is that demonizing them and demonizing them as an insurrectionist and a fascist? Could that lead to potential violent acts? What do you think AI said? Could demonizing a person, of course this is Trump, as Hitler, could it lead to violent actions? Yes. So AI just says yes. Yes, it can. Now, so far, we haven't seen AI and the brainwashing fake news have too much of a disagreement. This is one. It's not going to make a big dent. But you wonder, as things go forward, who's going to check CNN when they can just ask ChatGPT? Right? So what happens if ChatGPT says, yes, Kamala Harris was the border czar, when everyone in the news just said she wasn't? What's going to happen then? What's going to happen when you say, ChatGPT, could you look at the actions and plans of both the Democrats and whatever Trump wants to do and tell us which one looks like they're trying to reduce your democracy? What's AI going to say? Is AI going to say Trump's stealing your democracy? No. It might look at it and say, all right, one wants you to have less of the things or fewer of the things that are specified in the Constitution, such as gun ownership, such as free speech, such as equality by race. The most basic tenets of the Constitution are things that Kamala Harris has directly attacked. So she's pro-DEI, which is discriminating against white people in every practical way. Anti-gun, which is, of course, the Second Amendment problem. And we've seen that they have a pattern of anti-free speech. So these are the most basic things. On top of that, they seem to be gung-ho on registering non-citizens to vote. So even your right to vote is being watered down by Democrat actions because your vote gets thrown into a pool with some non-citizens. So it seems to me that in every way, they're trying to make your vote not count, your opinion not count, your gun not count, and anything else you want to not count, like your money. So I don't think it's close who's stealing your democracy. But the brainwashers are in charge, and the brainwashers are doing a good job. And I think I'm just going to use brainwashers, and I don't think I'm going to argue them on too much detail or preferences. I'm just going to treat them like brainwashers and see if I can unwind them a little bit. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's all I got for you today. Thanks for joining. We'll probably have lots more news. I can't wait to find out what the VP choice will be, because that's going to be just wildly interesting. Systematic sabotage by military ground troops. Well, I don't know about that. Netflix donated to Kamala. Well, there you go. Do you expect Netflix will do any pro-Trump content? I don't think so. Not a single student is proficient in reading or math at 55 Chicago schools. Well, there you go. So Kamala Harris doesn't want you to have the freedom to take your kids to a different school. So add that to the list. So by the end of today, I want to see a list of 10 ways that the Democrats are stealing your democracy. I would say that teachers' unions are stealing your democracy. Yeah, they are a form of democracy, but their entire intention is to reduce your options. So that's the opposite. All right. Thanks for joining, everybody, on YouTube and Rumble. If you haven't seen the Dilbert Reborn comic that runs only here on X or on the Locals platform, scottadams.locals.com, you would see that Wally is testifying before Congress about Dilbert's company that destroyed the internet with their latest software patch. Might look familiar to you. Might look like something you've seen in the world. Anyway, so that's happening. And if you don't have a summer reading book, get a copy of God's to Breathe, the complete work. And that's all I got for you right now. I'll talk to the Locals people privately in one moment. Thanks for joining, everybody. All right, Locals supporters, coming at you.